I know I've spoken to you before of the 4 pivots, which is by an author that I'll speak of later. And as our political world continues to come to forefront in the United States, it is important that we understand how much our perspective plays in our life. Webster's dictionary tells us that perspective means a mental view or outlook. It is in the interrelation in which a subject or its parts are mentally viewed. Not too long ago, we have a minister's listserv in Centers for Spiritual Living, and people have the opportunity to send in emails, ask questions, put out thoughts. And not too long ago, a topic on our minister's listserv generated a major discussion that went on for several days. And I have to tell you that it was not only always a friendly discussion. Tempers flared, and everybody was trying to convince the reader that their thoughts were the important thoughts and the right thoughts, while the reader was wrong. Needless to say, the discussion became very heated and very uncomfortable for some of us. One of the ministers, however, sent out why communication on a given topic is not always easily expressed via email. She stated, you know how you create worlds in your imagination when you're reading a book or a novel? The author might begin the story with the characters at the beach, and all of a sudden you take yourself to Hawaii. It's warm. There's slight ocean breezes that are cool, and the air smells like salt water, and the sand is warm underneath their bodies. That might not be, however, what the writer was thinking when they wrote the story. Yet we have created a very vivid picture in our mind of Hawaii. And then after you've read the book, all of a sudden a made for TV movie approaches, and actually the beach is on the East Coast. And as the scene opens, the characters aren't wearing their skimpy bathing suits. They're wearing jeans and hoodies and shoes, wrapped in beach blankets, trying to stay warm around a fire on wet sand. What we believed we were reading may not be what the person was saying in that novel. Just like when we read newspapers or emails or Facebook or TikTok. We create within our minds according to our beliefs, our history, our experiences, our ancestry, and so much more. Everyone may be reading the same thing, but they are not experiencing it the same. Dr. Jen Wright in the 4 Pivots tells us we all have limitations about what we see without an awareness of what we are limited by. We believe that our version of the world is the version of the world, and this idea is easier to say than it is to put into practice, because we need some assurance that our experience and interpretations of the world are based in fact and have meaning. Much like the explanation about the novel, Jen Wright explains that our perspective on a given topic is what helps us to confront our issues in the world. As he puts it, how else will we confront racism? How else will we address homophobia behavior within our family? How else will we call out sexist language or sexism among our friends? It is our perspective on an issue such as these that gives us insight into the world of how power and oppression work, even if it's invisible to most people. Most of us believe that our version of the world is the right version. We need only look at the division of our nation right now regarding the war in Gaza and Israel to understand how everyone thinks their perspective is right. Or look at the campaigns that have just begun between Trump. Trump. I apologize. I'm sorry. Trump and Harris. That was a Freudian slip if I've ever heard one. It is the belief that I'm right and you're wrong that keeps us from coming to the table to talk. Each of us needs assurance that our experiences and our interpretation of the world are based in facts and meaning. We want to know that our ideas, our concepts, and our thoughts have meaning and are important, not only to us, but to others as well. I remember early in my college psychology classes that we studied families. It always fascinated me how in a family of 2 or more siblings, that each child had a different perspective of what the family was like. Each of the siblings was raised in exactly the same family, but birth order, parental responsiveness, schooling, and many more factors affected their individual perspective of what each member of the family was like. I have experienced this more than once when working with a family of siblings as they plan for their parents' celebration of life. The truth is, sometimes we're not aware of how our personal perspectives on an issue can shine light into something that is yet obscure another. Most of the time, we don't question what we see or what we read or what is on television. We just act on it as if it was true. We fail to dig into the deep issues and look at multiple perspectives. A few years ago, I was visiting my niece in Georgia, and her youngest daughter, my great niece, in a touring softball league. And so the three of us went off for a weekend to play in the tournament because I loved to watch her play. And we were sitting in the motel where we were, where the whole entire team was. And there were several mothers that were there that morning. And I was surprised when the topic of Obama presidency came up. A couple of the women were sharing yet again how he had done something wrong. I politely interrupted them and asked, "Where did you hear or read that?" My niece promptly gave me a kick under the table and a nasty look. One woman responded, "Well, I read it on Facebook." I bit my tongue and asked as nice as I possibly could if she had read it anywhere else or seen it verified on one of the major networks. No, she hadn't. And I dropped it as much as I wanted to pursue it. As we head into this political year, I cannot encourage you enough to find reasonable sources for your information. And just why does that matter? because it's important that we understand and our knowledge about the bigger picture. When we're able to pivot our perspective, we become aware of that our curiosity will help us see more than we currently do. It is not what is being about right or wrong. It's about becoming aware that our perspective may be limited. Dr. Jenright tells the story of Nadra, his wife's experience with a Lyft driver. The Jenrights live in Oakland, and often their front yard is filled with political signs or signs that have a meaningful message. Kindness is everything. Black Lives Matter. As Sean puts it, we have a real Bay Area perspective kind of stuff and signs in our yard. Nadra and her daughter were leaving town and needed a ride to the airport, so they ordered a Lyft driver. The driver arrived, and he was obviously a white man and in his 60s. They placed their luggage in the trunk and got in the back seat. Now, Nadra is a pretty outgoing kind of person. And before they pulled away, Nadra noticed that the driver was reading all of the signs in their yard. And he didn't nod or smile, so Nadra greeted him with her normal, warm, bubbly, "Hey, how you doing today?" And the driver gave no response. Nadra, being the friendly, outgoing person that she was, tried a new approach. "Hello, it's a nice morning, isn't it?" Still no response. Nadra could not stand being ignored, and she concluded that he must be conservative based on his race and his age. And besides that, he was driving two Black women to the airport, and his racism must be raging. She just knew he had seen all the progressive signs in the yard and must be upset. Not wanting to give up, she made a third attempt to reach out. "What do you think of the signs in our yard?" And still he did not reply. Now she was absolutely furious and turned to her daughter. "Did you see that? He is ignoring me." And her daughter calmly responded, "Mom, he didn't ignore you. He just can't hear." And with that, she pointed at a sign that said, "Driver is deaf." From her limited perspective, she had made an assumption that the driver was conservative and a racist. How often do we do that? Make those assumptions about other people. It's like trying to put a 1,000-piece puzzle together without a picture to guide us. We can tell there are trees and water and a house and a sunset in the puzzle, but we have no idea where they go because we have no picture to confirm what it is. In the last election, there were 3 of us that took my trailer and went to Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah during COVID. We were tired. It was October. And I had on my typical Jesus shirt that I've showed you before, I believe, where it says "Catch up with Jesus." And I had on a Biden-Harris hat. And as we were walking on a trail in Sedona, all of a sudden this gal looks at me and she says, "I love your t-shirt." And I said, "Thank you." And then she saw my hat. And she said, "But your hat doesn't match your t-shirt." And I said, "Yes, it does." And we walked on. She had made an assumption initially because of what I had on for a t-shirt. A pivot in our perspective means we become more aware of the things in our lives that obscure how we see and act within our world. Young once stated, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves and who we are. When we're irritated by someone's political affiliation, how they dress, or the tattoos that adorn them, it is time to take a look at your perspective of the issue. Why do we feel this way? What has been your experience with this kind of issue in the past? Do we associate it with someone that we don't like? Is it an old tape that served a purpose at some time but is now no longer necessary? All of these are healthy questions to ask ourselves. We are never too old to shift our perspective and change. John Lubbock stated, "What we see is mainly what we look for." Have you ever noticed when you're shopping for a new item like a car or a TV, and you're pretty sure which model you want, and then all of a sudden you begin to see them everywhere, which affirms that your choice for buying that item is right? Well, the same thing happens with politics or issues that affect you, your community, and our country. We tend to gravitate and associate with people who think and believe the same way we do. We look for written articles or television stations and people that affirm that I'm right and you're wrong. Ernest Holmes tells us the perspective of reality is lost when we view life from the range of a short experience. When we fail to look at and review all perspectives of an issue, we are shortchanging not only ourselves, but those we work with and know. It's like driving in the fog. We can't see the scenery, and we can't see more than 100 feet or 100 yards down the road, and so we don't know exactly where we are. And so we make assumptions of what is beyond the 100 feet or the 100 yards. But you can never be sure because your view is obstructed. Perspective is about seeing close up and far away at the same time. It's about seeing through the fog. And when we are close to a situation, we have a deeper understanding of the issues such as poverty, racism, immigration, and homophobia. Being far away, however, gives us a bird's eye view of an issue so we can understand the root and systemic cause of why something is the way it is. System change researchers have identified ways that all of us can cultivate perspective. Imagine an iceberg with 4 levels on it. First is the very tip, which represents events and things that happen within our system. That could be family or business, our community, our church, or society as a whole. The next level down are the patterns, which are the trends that happen over time. The third level are the structures which represent the relationship that created the pattern on the previous level. And at the deepest level of the iceberg are the mental models. The models includes assumptions and beliefs and values we have that may be hidden away in our subconscious. Notice that assumptions and beliefs and values are at the deepest level, which is our subconscious. I believe the most important level of this model is the last one. If we're not willing to look at our assumptions, our beliefs, and our values, then nothing will ever change. That is a huge pivot. It means we have to personally be willing to watch our own and other potential interpretations of an issue or a situation. We have to be willing to listen. Interpretation occurs when we give meaning to something and accept it and as it the entire truth without investigating it. If we want to come to a greater understanding, we have to question our assumptions. When we must ponder our own meaning of an event, then we must ponder our own meaning of an event or a situation in the world. Recently, I was talking with a friend, and she indicated that she was praying that a certain candidate would not be elected president in the fall. My response to her was simple: pray for a positive shift in the consciousness of America. After all, it is our collective consciousness that has gotten to where we are today with our politics and all of our deplorable isms. The only way that is going to change is if our collective consciousness is transformed. It is that process of moving from trying to influence our beliefs to creating lasting change within ourselves and within our country. Malcolm's home is surrounded by tall, lush trees, and the entire neighborhood enjoys the privacy and the beauty of those trees. One day, Malcolm noticed that his neighbor directly behind him was building something in her backyard. His trees blocked his entire view completely, so he was not quite sure what she was building. All he could see was a couple of ropes hanging from some kind of a structure in her backyard. I wonder what Keisha is building, Malcolm asked. Javier walked over to his fence and peeked through the hole that had been there for years. And so Malcolm decided that he couldn't see in totally, so he'd call Javier and ask him to go take that look through his hole on the fence. And with his cell phone in one hand and a cold beer in the other, he replied, "Why, she's building a deck with railing on it. I can see it from the hole in my fence." Malcolm, however, was not convinced that that's what it was. After all, why would a decking need ropes? So Malcolm called Drew, who lived on the other side of Keisha, and he asked him to go take a look and see what he could see. And so he went out and he was able to look over his fence, and indeed he'd see what Keisha was building. He peeked over and he saw a small guest house. And the door had already been installed on this guest house. So Malcolm was still not satisfied. So he walked back to the fence and again he peered through the crack to see what he could see, and he was shocked at what he saw. It looked like she was building a boat with an anchor and ropes. Later that day, Drew and Javier and Malcolm met at Starbucks to gossip and compare notes. Now, each one of them knew exactly what Keisha was building. It was a guest house with a yellow door, a boat, and a decking. Each of them discounted the other person's views and versions of what they saw. And as they sat there arguing as to who was right and what they had seen, Keisha just happened to walk in for her afternoon tea. And they abruptly stopped arguing over what it was, and Keisha saw the guilty looks on their face. She walked over to them and blurted out, "I guess you're all wondering what I'm building in my backyard." And each stuck to their story: a deck, a boat, and a guest house. Well, you're all wrong. Meet me at the house and I'll show you. Much to their surprise, it was a tree house in the shape of a boat for her children, with a very large decking and railing. The ropes were there for them to climb up and then swing out to the yard. Her children happened to love boats. That was the reason it was shaped that way. Most of us are like Malcolm and Javier and Drew. We peer through the fences for our information and can see part of a story. And so we make decisions based on a perspective that is only partially correct. To correct that, we must become observers of our own assumptions. It is time for us to look beyond what we think is the truth and look for the greater whole so that we know what is the truth. In the case of the Lyft driver, Nedra saw the situation one day that she was being ignored. The Lyft driver could not hear, so he had a second perspective. But Naya, the daughter, was the wiser because she saw both perspectives and had read the sign. The process of taking our blinders off to see all sides of a situation is absolutely not easy. Making a pivot was not always meant to be. More importantly, Dr. Jen Wright states, when we begin to courageously practice pivots in our perspective together, we recreate a society where everyone belongs and a world basks in the joy of justice. This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours. And so it is. Amen. So it is.
Thank you very much.